Paula had always dreamed of getting married, a desire that was heavily influenced by her mother. No man stayed by her side for longer than 6 months, which made Paula feel unhappy. Her mother taught her that the key to a successful life was a successful marriage. From a young age, she had heard her mother's constant reminders about the importance of marriage. She believed that if she took good care of her husband, she would live a happy life. Absorbing these instructions like a sponge, Paula was filled with joy when Greg proposed to her at the age of 19. For Paula, it felt like the pinnacle of happiness had been reached. Greg, slightly older at 24, had first met Paula in a park where she was sitting, sobbing, and trying to wipe the paint off her jeans. Their love blossomed quickly, and when they announced their engagement, no one was surprised. The wedding plans were put into motion. Soon Paula gave birth to 2 children and settled into her domestic life. She strived to be the perfect wife, going above and beyond despite her exhaustion. Greg was constantly pleased with her efforts. At her mother's insistence, a delicious hot dinner was always prepared at home for her lover as soon as he arrived. The children went to bed and kissed their father on the cheek before the couple left to enjoy each other's company. The man probably showed off his better half to his friends and colleagues who were genuinely jealous of him. However, behind closed doors, instead of love and warmth, his beloved often showered him with reproaches and lectures. When their son turned 5 and their daughter turned 3, Paul had the opportunity to go to work. However, this required additional qualifications. She had previously graduated from the Faculty of Economics and worked for 6 months at the firm before going on maternity leave. After 5 years of endless child care, Paula desperately wanted to go out into the world again. Although she never admitted it to anyone, she was tired of her family life. Tired of doing housekeeper duties, wiping her children's snot, and pretending to be happy when Greg came home. Secretly, she followed the lives of her old school and university friends who fully enjoyed their youth parties and socializing. Paula's interactions were limited to other moms and the playground. Despite this, she secretly decided to take courses and continue working, even hiding it from her husband. It was at the training center that she met Leo. He was their accounting instructor, and Paula immediately fell in love with his majestic and handsome demeanor. Leo also took notice of the lovely Paula, who sat at the front desk and attentively listened to him for an hour and a half. After the class, he caught up with her on the street, and they had a conversation. It was Friday, and throughout the weekend, Paula couldn't shake thoughts of the teacher. Unbeknownst to herself, their relationship began to develop. Love consumed her so much that at times she forgot about her husband and children. With the arrival of her new love, she neglected cooking dinner for the first time in their years of marriage. When Greg returned home to find nothing on the table but an empty candy dish, he was greatly surprised. His wife, who had actually spent the entire day with her lover, claimed on social media to have a terrible headache. That was the first excuse. 3 weeks later, when their son fell ill, Paul had to confess to her husband about attending the training. He was surprised, grumbled, but eventually accepted his spouse's decision and asked his mother to help with the grandchildren. While the mother-in-law looked after the children, Paula immersed herself in the arms of Leo. Greg began to grow concerned about his wife's sudden change in behavior was alarming. She repeatedly failed to cook dinner, started oversleeping, and consequently couldn't manage getting her husband ready for work, let alone fulfilling marital duties. Greg couldn't remember the last time he had intimate contact with his wife. He became angry, filled with silent resentment, and could not find a sense of happiness. For the first time in their time together, Paul and Greg started to argue. "I forbid you to go to work," he shouted in the midst of a heated argument. "I am not your possession," his wife retorted in response. There had never been such a commotion in their house before. Leo and Paula had always been critical of their friends who quarreled with each other, believing that there should be no such disagreements between spouses. Their relationship was disgustingly perfect. However, as their training came to an end, they realized that it would become increasingly difficult for them to spend time together. Paula started talking about leaving her husband and being with Leo, but his lack of enthusiasm made her back down. She realized that she couldn't rely on anything. After all, they were just lovers, and she knew very little about him. He might even have his own family. She didn't want to go back to her unloved husband, but she couldn't leave with Leo either. She needed help with the children. She couldn't raise them alone. She discovered her unplanned pregnancy too late. Right before she went to work, the gynecologist congratulated her on the news, leaving her stunned, and she fainted right in her chair. After regaining consciousness, she sobbed for several hours in the hallway of the clinic, realizing that abortion was not an option. She was terrified, especially because she was almost certain that the child had nothing to do with her husband. For the rest of the week, she agonized at the thought of confessing her situation to both men. As she contemplated how to proceed with her confession, debating whether to start with Greg or Leo, fate made the decision for her. When Paula returned home from the hospital that day, she absent-mindedly tucked the folder containing the ultrasound results among the other documents in a drawer. Greg had never thought to search through the drawer on his own before, usually relying on his wife's help. However, after a recent argument, he was so upset with Paula that he went digging through the drawer himself. His eyes landed on the ultrasound scans, and as he perused the document and noted the pregnancy description, he couldn't help but wonder which child the photos belonged to, his daughter or son. When he saw the date on the study, he was left speechless. Walking over to his wife, he handed her the sheet and demanded an explanation. Tears welled up in Paula's eyes as she whispered, "I'm pregnant." Greg's initial reaction was one of joy as he embraced his wife with affectionate words. However, Paula continued to cry, and suddenly, amidst her sobs, she blurted out, "It's not yours. I don't love you." Shocked and hurt, Greg's emotions flared. But he managed to control himself, resorting only to harsh words. Paula tearfully revealed the truth to her husband, leading to Greg packing his belongings and leaving the apartment that same evening. She later confided in Leo, who upon hearing about the situation, coldly declared that he did not acknowledge the child. "Paula, I have a family," he tried to explain. "I don't need your child. Get back together with your husband and you'll find a way to raise it." Paula felt a wave of sickness wash over her upon hearing his words. She couldn't fathom such an assumption. Both men had abandoned her, thrusting her into her worst nightmare. She was now left alone with 3 children. The pain and resentment consumed her, making her want to scream in despair. She couldn't imagine this outcome and couldn't accept her new life. Greg did what he could to help with the children, but Paula couldn't rely on anyone else after the divorce. Not even her own mother would communicate with her, leaving Paula to single-handedly take care of the children. Exhausted from work, she would come home and collapse, crying into her pillow out of helplessness. The fleeting passion she once had burned out, leaving her alone amongst the ruins of a never truly happy life.